Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode, in which we will be discussing, no joke, 5 more Wii Hidden Gems. Thank you for tuning in to watch as my quest for Wii Hidden Gems persists. I'm back today with the penultimate Wii Hidden Gems list video that I have planned. This little console, only sitting at 3 DVD cases high, has really impressed me as a piece of hardware rocking a robust amount of great games that people are simply not aware of. It's a struggle to discover them all. In a comment to a prior Wii Hidden Gems video, I was asked how I go about finding them. I have found that 9 times out of 10, the design quality of the logo will be a good indicator of the game's overall quality. Presumably because if they don't have the resource to make a decent game, then they definitely don't have the resources to make a decent logo either. It's not always the case, but it's a pretty solid start. I also just scour the list of every Wii game released and look for names that have promise. This system for finding more games has not led to every single one that I've found, but it's gone a long way. With that being said, here are 5 yet more hidden gems for the Nintendo Wii.
It's beautiful.
Vertigo. This game is actually pretty interesting. If you like Monkey Ball, you may assume this is pretty comparable to that. And it kind of is. Here's the deal. You know how in Monkey Ball, when you press the control stick forward, the whole stage tilts forward? Well, instead of that, when you tilt the Wii Remote forward, this gravity ring apparatus is actually what tilts, pulling the ball in the direction of the tilt. It's a negligible difference, but it means somewhat ironically that this game is a better choice for people that actually have vertigo. It's a pretty simple course clear game, but it works differently from Monkey Ball in that you have certain checkpoints you have to meet along the course, which I think is a pretty good idea because of the way levels are laid out. Oftentimes they go from top to bottom, so you could just fall from the very top to the very bottom and skip every checkpoint, especially since holding down B will cause your ball to start sticking to its spot. Doing this would remove all skill and all strategy for the most part, but you still have opportunities to make these giant cuts to the stage between checkpoints. Holding down A causes your ball to speed up, which becomes mandatory in later levels of the game. The player really has to get the hang of braking and boosting to get through some of the challenging, narrow passages within the time allotted. It has pretty great level design and plenty of levels and areas to go through. It's overall pretty rad. You apparently can also customize your Zorb design to make it more unique. The graphics are pretty nice, and the texture quality is pretty good. It has fun gameplay and makes for a really fun, although occasionally wrist-hurting, experience. Ultimate Shooting Collection. Let me just give full disclosure, this game is not in fact the Ultimate Shooting Collection, it's just a shooting collection. But that doesn't mean it isn't super fun. The game is actually really cool. If you enjoyed Castle Shikigami on the Wii, you'll probably get a lot out of this game as well. It's 3 arcade games that were all developed by the company Milestone, with one of them being co-developed by Able Corporation. The games are all bullet hell shooters. Each is really fun with cool stylized 3D graphics. It supports the GameCube and classic controllers, as well as offers to switch the orientation of the screen sideways, making it more like Gradius or something like that. Doing this actually alters the controls to switch up and down and left and right so that the ship controls from a side-on view, which is a really interesting feature that I've never seen in a game like this before. You have a swipe attack to destroy certain bullets from enemies, and you can also use it to hit power-ups. Swiping them changes what they are, so you have this nice risk-reward mechanic where you push them away instead of picking them up right away. This can increase the points or cycle through until you get the power-up that you wanted. You also get a nice shield move that is very limited in its uses, but really helps you get in to do damage up close to the enemies. It also helps to recover some of the objects you dropped when you take a hit. The first game is Karus? It features the swipe ability to let you cycle through objects and can damage some enemies. When you stop firing and swiping for a second, you'll get a little shield directly in front of you to block incoming bullets. It's still very small and doesn't protect much. The gameplay feels great and is pretty conservative with what it considers a hit on you, and liberal with what hits an enemy, which is a nice feature, especially if you don't frequent the bullet hell genre. The gameplay feels really juicy, and it's satisfying to get collectibles because you have to risk something to go for them. When you catch them without taking damage, it feels good. The next game is Radioallergy, or Radergy for short. This game actually offers you some options about your ship when you start. You can choose between a constant laser that fires out directly in front of you, a beam that rapid fires, or a bunch of bubbles, all of which pierce effectively and help clear out the screen. You also get to pick a ship to fly out of 3 options. I typically choose the slowest one because it helps me not overshoot my positioning too much. The biggest difference between here and Karas are that there are a lot of point pickups on the ground, like food and other random pictures. And swiping away power-ups to go for the one you want doesn't work here. I do like the art style slightly more here though. The lines seem a little thicker and help things stand out even more from each other. The last game is Chaos Field. It lets you pick a ship like Radergy, but the gun you have is tied to the ship. It also focuses a little more on distinct boss battles. Most of the game consists of going up against one large enemy that fills the screen, as opposed to being a large group of enemies. In fact, to reflect this, the screen is more zoomed in as well. The game also really focuses on the swipe ability. You're able to swipe most bullets, and it is also emphasized as a means of attack more here, possibly due to the more close quarters nature of the screen. Swiping means that you can't fire, so you have to balance the ability to protect yourself with doing enough damage. There's a time limit on being able to beat each major enemy too, so you have to really choose if you want to use the saber or try and weave through the attacks. It's a fun game as well, but my favorite of the 3 is the one most people generally agree on from what I've seen. The generic name of the collection really damaged its potential, as well as the fact that it was published by UFO, but so is Domino Rally, interestingly enough. I know that they kind of have a bad rap, but I tend not to associate them with bad quality. They have a very interesting catalog that I'll probably take a deep delve into more in the future. This game, though, is an expensive but fun title. If you can snag it for a low enough price point, you won't be disappointed.
As we neared Rivendell, we spotted a traveler being
The Lord of the Rings, Aragorn's Quest. Special thanks and shout out to Anti-Cue Cardboard for recommending this game to me almost half a year ago. Here we have what is technically not the only Lord of the Rings game for the Nintendo Wii. This game is a fairly charming but somewhat simple action title with a pseudo-original story. The frame story centers around Frodo Gamgee, the love child of Samwise and Frodo. Probably. The Shire is preparing for a visit from Aragorn by setting up a festival with booths and revelry, and the booths are actually used as a clever way to teach players the mechanics of the main game. It makes for a pretty fun opening segment, and as the game goes on, the day advances and a few more interesting things happen in the Shire. The main story begins when you sit down to listen to Sam, who is the mayor of the Shire, I guess, as he recounts his adventures with Aragorn. You play a segment of the trilogy, and then you pop back to the Shire for some side quests. It's a pretty fun little experience. The Wii Remote combat works well and has a little depth to it to keep things more interesting, but the combat system is hardly robust. I recommend playing on King difficulty because the normal difficulty isn't particularly challenging. As you play, you gain new items you can use to traverse the world. You can acquire a torch to burn down spiderwebs, a bow and arrow, a shield, etc. There are hidden collectibles in the main levels too, providing an incentive to explore the world. Speaking of which, looks pretty decent. It's a safe bet for a Wii game to go with the stylized look instead of a hyper-realistic one, and this one works well enough to be passable. Pretty good draw distance, nice models, and good animations make it a nice visual experience. The game also supports a co-op mode with the second player playing as Gandalf. I can really recommend this game to people that enjoy Lord of the Rings. It makes for a fun detour that stretches a little past what is seen in the movies, by expanding on smaller scenes that could make for interesting scenarios. It's also a fun enough game to be enjoyable on its own, separate from the Lord of the Rings franchise. I would even recommend it as a pretty fun Wii co-op experience. Geon Cube. This game is a very interesting little experience, and not just because my copy has an adorable little scribble inside the box from someone informing whomever I guess should read it that this is their favorite game, but because the game itself is a lot of fun. It's sort of like a competitive strategic Pac-Man? The way it works is that you have a flat plane mashing on the top and bottom of an identical playfield. The plane is composed of a square grid that has pack pellet-like dots floating above them. The gameplay is a competitive score-based affair. To score points, you have to collect a certain proportion of dots before you are charged. When you're charged, you can rush for the center of your opponent's board by flipping to the opponent's side. If you get hit when attempting this charge run, you'll be on the opponent's side without the pellets you need, and you'll have to return to your own side of the board. Every so often, you can attack the opponent by jumping and slamming into the ground, which bounces them on the opposite side, causing them to drop pellets. And like I said before, this is how you can stop them from scoring when they come to your side. Before the match starts, you can also select what power-up you would like to receive. One of them lets you move faster, another one lets you swap controls, and there's one that drops spikes on the opponent's side, that sort of thing. There are several power-up options to consider for your strategy. I like to focus on the hardest pellets first, and then circle back to the easiest, because when you win a round, those pellets don't respawn. So you can make the easiest, quickest pellets the ones you're grabbing near the end, and then it's easier for you and harder for the opponent, who usually goes for whatever they can whenever they start, which is poor planning and makes it easier for you down the line. The game has a lot of strategies, and is a whole lot of fun. I can safely say that this is another UFO game that was overlooked and qualifies as a hidden gem. It's just a lot of fun once you get the hang of the strategy. Speed Zone. I have to assume that this game got such a bad rap because people misunderstood it entirely. I played this game for a little while, only to discover that it's pretty awesome. It's got reviews along the lines of 1 out of 5 and 37%. I took a bit of a chance on it due to a rough hunch that I had. I am very glad that I did. It completely slipped through the cracks. I believe the issue was people were expecting something like Wipeout or NASCAR. I'm not sure, but what they should have been expecting was something like Trackmania. It even has a mode where you can race a ghost. I saw a lot of complaints about terrible controls and bad handling. I'm not very good at highly technical driving games, but I still managed to get to grips with this game without too much difficulty. You have to realize that this game's not actually an arcade racer or something of that nature. It's a highly precise game with ridiculously realistic controls. It makes for a fun experience by blending super technical and skilled driving with unrealistic and unique futuristic space tracks. This is actually a really cool and interesting contrast I haven't seen before. If you go airborne, you have to keep your wheels straight when you land, or else you'll completely lose control of the car. In some turns, you're better off going for the handbrake instead of the pedal. If you turn too quickly without gradually pulling the car into it, that can also make you lose control. If you get a good groove going, you can get some great speed. It's so rewarding and satisfying to get a gold on a track in the time trial. Different medals award you different amounts of credit to work with. Then you can use that to make purchases of other vehicles or vehicle upgrades that can impact your driving. You can also purchase different vehicle skins. The graphics are really nice. The cars are very stylized and cool. There's also a pretty decent chunk of content in the game, with collectibles on each track that you have to come up with really clever uses of the terrain to reach, and a good variety of techniques to master for optimal times. I had a blast with this game. It actually breaks my heart a bit that the developers put in all this extra effort to make a game like this that was clever in its contrast between real car handling and unbelievable track designs. They put in all this effort and they got nothing out of it. The game reviewed terribly. This is another game that I'm really hoping people will give another chance because it's been so much fun to me. It deserves so much better than this. This kind of thing scares me. The work and love and effort is clearly there, and yet somehow people missed it. If you want to hear about why I think this can happen, I actually wrote a lot more about this game that I ended up spinning off into a separate video about media consumption, where I talk about a few other things too, and explain how I believe this unfortunate circumstance can come about. This game supports the nunchuck, the classic controller, and a GameCube controller, all of which actually work great. I recommend the classic controller though personally. For some reason, the game actually supports 8-player racing, God only knows why. I actually came to most of my conclusions about really enjoying the game before I even figured out that there was a race mode in single player. I just thought that it was something like Trackmania in single player too. But no, it offers a race and a battle mode. While I haven't actually finished all the levels yet, it appears that they have separate tracks between them, making for a lot of content overall. It's a great game with a decent amount of content. Please give it a chance. Thanks for being here to check out my findings. I have one more Hidden Gem list video planned that I will be covering only puzzle games that I've come across in my searching. That might sound like a huge turnoff for some people, but there are a few games in there that I'm fairly certain everyone can enjoy. If you want to find out more about those games though, you just have to subscribe and ring the bell. And if you found something you decided to give a try and liked on here, it would be awesome if you would drop a like. Jesus loves you and so do I. Tune in next time, and goodbye.